Mank is a 2020 film directed by David Fincher and which stars the likes of Gary Oldman, Amanda Seyfried, Arliss Howard and Charles Dance. It's Fincher's first film after Gone Girl in 2014, meaning this is the longest gap between two movies in his filmography. Mank tells the story of Herman Mankiewicz, nicknamed Mank, an alcoholic, washed-up screenwriter who has a car accident and is bedridden while he rushes to finish the screenplay to Citizen Kane, under pressure from the now legendary film director Orson Welles, who was in his mid-20s at the time. Citizen Kane is a legendary movie, one of the greatest of all time, famous for numerous technical innovations and being a great character study, and it's said to be based on the famous newspaper baron William Randolph Hearst, who was infuriated with the movie and tried to prevent the film's release. Via a series of flashbacks, the film unravels just why Mank decided to use Hearst as his inspiration for the main character in the screenplay, someone he knew personally, and it follows numerous attempts by numerous parties trying to convince Mank to walk away from the project or change the screenplay to avoid the wrath of Hearst. Having background knowledge of the history and politics associated with Citizen Kane does help in enhancing your viewing of this movie, as does, of course, actually having watched Citizen Kane, not for anything else than just to avoid being lost when it comes to the events and names thrown at you. Whilst the movie is something of a character study of Mank himself, it cloaks itself as a kind of love letter to Citizen Kane, being filmed in black and white, and mimicking many of the kind of shots you see in the original film, with there being numerous Easter eggs and references throughout the movie. Parts where you go, oh, that's like that scene from Citizen Kane, and others where you go, oh, that's like that part from Citizen Kane. The movie's cinematography, score, and numerous stylistic choices borrow heavily from Citizen Kane, and you could even argue the two plots are similar. I was kind of thrown a bit by the fact that the movie begins with a new guy joining Mank's team and his first experiences with Mank and the film studio, and then it kind of moves to the point of view of Mank's brother and him working his way up the company, and then it jumps to a woman who is caring for Mank while he's bedridden, and usually the film ditches the previous character it was associating with when it moves to a new one, while still being centered around Mank himself. This made things a bit uneasy, because you get comfortable with a certain character and then all of a sudden they're no longer in the focus. But I wonder if this was an intentional effect, as there is a potentially meta line in the film where a character remarks about Mank's screenplay that I can't remember what the line was now, but it was basically what I was thinking about this film, that the narrative focus jumps from character to character. I did crack a smile when the film started, with the opening credit roll mimicking so perfectly the black and white films of old, though the cigarette burns throughout the film were a bit much. And for a movie that is so clearly a love letter to Citizen Kane, with so many painstakingly minute details in place, I will point out though that it is bizarre that the movie was shot digitally and was presented in a widescreen aspect ratio. I mean, if you're going to go as far as they went, why not commit and go all the way? The acting in the film was great. Gary Oldman, whilst kind of miscast when you consider the age he's supposed to be, was in fine form, and it was wonderful to see him as a leading man, which surprisingly he doesn't really do that much. His performance is drenched in subtleties, and the supporting cast is on point as well. This is not the kind of film to watch when you want to relax on a weekend evening. It's actually quite complex and challenging to follow. There's a scene early on, for example, where numerous characters in the upper echelons of high society are mingling in Hearst's mansion, and the rapid nature of conversations are like machine gun fire, and I was sitting there thinking, wait, which character are all these guys talking about here? But not before the conversation had already moved on. Now, if you're going into this film expecting shouting matches between Mank and numerous other characters, William Hearst launching a massive smear campaign and declaring war on Citizen Kane, Mank and Welles coming to severe blows over Mank's desire for screen credit, and other stuff that you might think would be in a kind of film of this sort, about the making of Citizen Kane, you're probably going to be disappointed. I didn't really feel there was a lot to Mank. I'm not the kind of person that goes into a movie with ballooned expectations because the film director is a heavyweight, But even still, I found myself underwhelmed with this picture. It seemingly chooses the least interesting avenues to explore, and guys like Hearst and Welles are hardly in the film. The movie has a knack for going into a flashback just as soon as a scene set in the present day becomes interesting, and then cutting the flashback short just as it got interesting. The movie lacked weight. It didn't have any scenes of genuine dramatic depth. There was no real core focus of the film that kept it going. There was no real climax. It all just kind of felt a bit naff. And when it was over, I still wasn't sure what the intention behind the film was, what I was supposed to have learnt or gotten out of the experience, because, as I gather, the events in the film are heavily dramatised and fictionalised. So, what was the point? It clearly wasn't to educate then. I was waiting for a kind of penny drop moment where suddenly everything would click. There would be a meaning to the film's numerous boredom-inducing scenes. And I think attempts were made, like one part where a character commits suicide, which fails to connect because we hardly spent any time with this character, and something of a meek, deflating balloon of a climatic showdown between Mank and Hearst. But no parts of the film ever really entered into the great movie-making zone. In spite of the upbeat, lively soundtrack, Gary Oldman in sparkling form, the movie feels dreary and sullen, like a book with a magical front cover but then flooded with charts and graphs once you actually open it. By the time the actual drama was injected into the movie, and there wasn't much of it anyway, I just kind of felt, so what? All of a sudden, Mank wants screen credit so he can show publicly to Hearst that he's sticking it to him. Welles has a little hissy fit as a result, which goes nowhere. And I'm just thinking to myself, so what? What does it all matter? Why is this even important? And that's on the movie for failing to reel you in and having you invested in Mank's internal struggles. And then you have the added difficulty of most people going into the film thinking it's a movie about the making of Citizen Kane, not an exploration of the troubles of Herman Mankiewicz, which it actually is. Perhaps all the technical wizardry of the movie is actually a distraction that takes away from that. I understand that Mank was written by David Fincher's late father, and the movie might be more of a touching tribute to him than Mank himself, and it's of course a personal project for Fincher, one that he's been trying to make since the 1990s and has only just been given the chance through Netflix. Understanding this could give the film more context, seeing as though with a lot of the top-tier film directors who have made movies with Netflix, like Martin Scorsese and the Coen brothers, it's an opportunity for them to make a movie they would otherwise be unable to do so through the Hollywood studios and the Hollywood system. So they end up making a film, perhaps for themselves, as opposed to for an audience a lot of the times. And this film feels like that. It feels like Fincher didn't necessarily make this for us, but for himself, as a tribute to his father, which is all fine and well. I just don't think that the outcome was a very strong movie, and I don't think the film has much power to it. Despite the technical aspects of the film being on point, it fell flat, and I think the structure and storytelling played a big part in that. They were going for a few different things in this film, like fake news and the power of the press, but similar to 2019's Joker film, which I did like. It just kind of brushed over its themes without delving deep, and as a result, the heavy stuff didn't really land. There's just not enough focus. The characters talk so much but say so little. At times, it's a jovial throwback to classic Hollywood, sometimes a hard-hitting introspective look at an alcoholic screenwriter. Hearst becomes the villain, and there's supposed to be some kind of big reveal or betrayal between him and Mank, when there was very little to suggest the two were even close to begin with. And then the closing title cards all of a sudden make it look as though Welles was the bad guy, and the entire film was about Mank and his relationship, when he was hardly in the film. It all felt quite disjointed. It wasn't really that entertaining, and I had to stifle a few yawns during my watch. I give it a 6 out of 10.